Street vendor shares his food with hungry office workers, not realizing one would make him a partner in their company. The words echoed in Miguel Reyes' mind as he unfolded the newspaper article, his weathered hands trembling slightly in the crisp morning air. 3 months ago, he'd been just another struggling street vendor with nothing but a small food cart and dreams too heavy to carry. Now his story was printed in black and white, a testament to how quickly life could transform when kindness met opportunity. The day that changed everything had begun like any other. Miguel had risen before dawn, his 52-year-old body protesting with familiar aches as he prepared his small apartment's kitchen for another day of food preparation. Outside, the autumn air carried the first whispers of winter, the kind that seeped through his thin jacket and nestled in his bones. His fingers worked methodically, chopping vegetables for his signature empanadas, the recipe his grandmother had brought from Venezuela decades ago. Each cut was precise, each fold of dough practiced to perfection. Food had always been Miguel's language of love, even when there were fewer and fewer people to share it with. 3 years had passed since Elena's death, his wife of 27 years, taken suddenly by an aneurysm that left no time for goodbyes. Their only son, Carlos, had moved across the country for work, their conversations now reduced to brief Sunday calls that never quite filled the silence of Miguel's apartment. The small kitchen radio murmured financial news as Miguel packed his coolers with the day's offerings. The economy was struggling, something he didn't need a radio to tell him. His once reliable corner near the financial district had yielded diminishing returns for months. Regular customers disappeared as companies downsized, replaced by harried faces with tighter budgets and brown bag lunches. By 7:30, Miguel had wheeled his cart to his usual spot on the corner of Pine and Montgomery. The skyscrapers loomed above him like silent judges, their glass facades reflecting a bright autumn sun that offered light without warmth. He arranged his empanadas, tamales, and fresh fruit cups with care, setting out the small chalkboard sign with his daily specials written in his careful, slanting script. "Morning, Miguel," called Darlene, the newspaper vendor whose stand had occupied the adjacent corner for as long as Miguel had been there. "Morning," he replied, summoning a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Beautiful day." Darlene's gaze lingered on him a moment too long. "You doing okay? You look tired." Miguel waved away her concern. "Just the usual. You know how it is." What he didn't say was that yesterday he'd made only $37. Not enough to cover the ingredients, let alone his permit fees or rent. Or that his landlord had slipped another rent increase notice under his door last night. Or that the pain in his right knee, the one that had bothered him since a construction accident 15 years ago, was flaring up again, making each step a private agony. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. By 11, Miguel had served only 4 customers, the smallest morning crowd in months. He checked his phone. No messages from Carlos, who was probably busy with his new promotion. Miguel tried not to feel the sting of that. His son had built a good life. That was what parents wanted, wasn't it? As noon approached, a commotion erupted from the gleaming tower across the street. Horizon Financial, one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. A stream of well-dressed people poured onto the sidewalk, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. Miguel watched as security guards held the doors open, gesturing for everyone to clear the building. "What's happening?" He called to Darlene, who was already on her phone scrolling through news alerts. "Layoffs," she said grimly. "Big ones. Horizon's cutting 20% of their workforce, effective immediately." Miguel's heart sank as he watched the scene unfold. Some people stood in stunned silence, staring at the building as if waiting for someone to call them back inside, to say it had all been a mistake. Others wept openly, comforted by colleagues who had suffered the same fate. A few stormed off, fury evident in every step. For over an hour, the crowd lingered on the sidewalk. Miguel noticed many clutching small boxes containing personal items. Family photos, desk plants, coffee mugs, pitiful souvenirs of careers suddenly terminated. The autumn sun beat down, incongruously bright for such a dark moment in these people's lives. A young woman in a navy suit sat down heavily on a nearby bench, her box balanced on her knees. Miguel recognized her. She sometimes bought his coffee, always leaving a generous tip and complimenting his homemade cinnamon syrup. Her name escaped him, but he remembered her smile. Today, that smile was nowhere to be found as she stared vacantly ahead, shock written across her features. Without thinking, Miguel prepared a cup of coffee, extra cinnamon, just how she liked it, and carried it to her. "On the house," he said quietly, holding out the steaming cup. She looked up, momentary confusion giving way to recognition. "Oh, thank you, but I don't have any." Her voice trailed off as she gestured helplessly at her box of belongings. "No charge," Miguel insisted. "You look like you need it." The woman's eyes welled with tears as she accepted the coffee. "That's really kind. Thank you." Miguel nodded and turned back to his cart, but something made him pause. All around him were people experiencing one of their worst days. Some were making phone calls, presumably to spouses or family members, voices tight with controlled emotion. Others sat in groups, shell-shocked and silent. These weren't just faceless office workers anymore. They were people whose lives had just been upended, just as his had been when Elena died, when his construction career ended with his knee injury, when Carlos moved away. Miguel looked at his cart, still laden with food that would likely go unsold. He'd been preparing for failure anyway. What difference would it make? He pulled out a stack of paper plates and began filling them with empanadas and tamales. Then, taking a deep breath, he walked toward the nearest group of former Horizon employees. "Hungry?" he asked, simply holding out the plates. They looked up in surprise. A man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair shook his head. "That's nice, but we can't." "Please," Miguel said. "Food shouldn't go to waste. And everyone thinks better with a full stomach." After a moment's hesitation, they accepted. Miguel returned to his cart, prepared more plates, and moved to another group. Then another. Soon he was moving methodically among the crowd, distributing food to anyone who would take it. Some tried to pay, but he refused. "Today it's just neighbors helping neighbors," he told them. As the food dwindled, Miguel noticed a tall man watching him from the periphery of the crowd. Unlike the others, his suit was impeccable, his posture confident. He didn't carry a box of belongings. Clearly, he hadn't been among those let go. Something about his intense observation made Miguel uneasy, but he continued his impromptu food distribution until his cart was nearly empty. When Miguel returned to his cart, the man approached. Up close, Miguel could see he was younger than he'd initially appeared, perhaps in his mid-30s. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp and assessing behind designer glasses. "That was quite something," the man said, his voice carrying an accent Miguel couldn't quite place. British, maybe, but with something else mixed in. Miguel shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Just food." "Not just food," the man countered. "Kindness, dignity, community." He extended his hand. "I'm Aiden Cheng. I'm the CFO at Horizon." Miguel hesitated before shaking the offered hand. "Miguel Reyes. I know who you are, Mr. Reyes. I've bought your coffee every Wednesday for the past year. Best in the financial district." Miguel tried to recall the man's face among his regular customers, but couldn't place him. Before he could respond, Aiden continued, "What you did today, it matters, especially today." He glanced back at the diminishing crowd. Corporate decisions are often made at a distance. Numbers on spreadsheets, but the human cost, he shook his head. Well, not everyone remembers that part. Miguel wasn't sure what to say. This man was part of the leadership that had just terminated hundreds of people. Yet there was something genuine in his expression, a weight of responsibility that seemed real. "Everyone has to eat," Miguel said simply. Aiden's gaze returned to him, searching. "How's business been for you lately, Mr. Reyes?" "If you don't mind my asking." The question caught Miguel off guard. Pride urged him to offer platitudes, but something in Aiden's direct gaze made him answer honestly. "Not good," he admitted. "The economy, you know. People have less to spend." Aiden nodded thoughtfully. "Yet you gave away your inventory today. Sometimes there are more important things than money." A slight smile touched Aiden's lips. "I'd like to hear more about your business, Mr. Reyes. Your background. How you developed these recipes." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. "Would you be willing to meet me for coffee tomorrow?" "My treat, of course." Miguel accepted the card, confusion evident on his face. Why? "Let's just say I'm interested in authentic food and authentic people. Both seem increasingly rare these days." Aiden glanced at his watch. "I need to get back. Crisis management meetings all afternoon. Shall we say 10 o'clock tomorrow? There's a cafe called Taurus on Sacramento Street." Before Miguel could formulate a response, Aiden was striding away, phone already at his ear. Miguel looked down at the embossed card in his hand, then at his nearly empty cart. None of this day made sense anymore. That evening, Miguel's apartment felt especially quiet. He'd called Carlos, hoping to discuss the strange encounter, but had only reached voicemail. After preparing a simple dinner, just rice and beans, as he needed to conserve funds, he sat at his small kitchen table and examined Aiden's card under the yellow light of his aging lamp. Aiden Chung, Chief Financial Officer, Horizon Financial Group. Below that, a phone number, email, and the company's sleek logo. Miguel turned the card over in his fingers, wondering what a CFO could possibly want from a struggling street vendor. Perhaps it was charity, though Aiden hadn't struck him as the pitying type. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Miguel had lived in the city long enough to know that not every opportunity was what it seemed. Still, what did he have to lose by hearing the man out? The next morning, Miguel found himself standing outside Torres Cafe 15 minutes early, dressed in his best shirt, a light blue button-down that Elena had given him for their 25th anniversary. He'd polished his worn leather shoes and combed his salt and pepper hair neatly. Whatever this meeting was about, he would face it with dignity. The cafe was upscale but welcoming, with warm wood tones and the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee. Miguel spotted Aiden at a corner table, already waiting despite the early hour. The CFO was engaged with his laptop but looked up as Miguel approached, closing the computer with a smile. "Mr. Reyes, thank you for coming." Aiden stood, extending his hand. "Please sit. I've taken the liberty of ordering a pour-over coffee for myself, but I wasn't sure of your preference." "Just regular coffee is fine," Miguel said, settling into the chair opposite Aiden. "Black." After the waiter had taken his order, an awkward silence fell. Miguel waited, hands folded on the table, for Aiden to explain why he'd summoned him here. "I've been thinking about your empanadas," Aiden finally said, leaning forward slightly. "The dough, it's different from others I've tried. Lighter somehow." Miguel couldn't hide his surprise at this opening. "My grandmother's recipe. She used a little yucca flour mixed with the wheat. Not traditional, but she said it made them special." She was right. Aiden took a sip of his coffee. "And the filling, the one with shredded beef and olives, that's not something I've seen on many street carts. It's from Maracaibo, where my family lived." Each region of Venezuela has its own style. Miguel's coffee arrived, and he wrapped his hands around the warm mug, finding comfort in its heat. The conversation continued in this vein for several minutes, Aiden asking detailed questions about ingredients, techniques, regional variations. Miguel gradually relaxed, finding himself sharing stories of cooking with his grandmother, of the small restaurant his parents had operated in Caracas before political instability forced them to emigrate. "You've never thought of opening a restaurant here?" Aiden asked. Miguel gave a small, rueful laugh. "Of course I've thought of it. Everyone in food service dreams of their own place. But the reality?" He shook his head. "The costs, the regulations, the competition, and at my age, banks aren't eager to take chances. What if the financial barriers were removed?" Aiden's question was casual, but his gaze was intent. Miguel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Aiden leaned back in his chair. "I should tell you why I really asked you here, Mr. Reyes. I'm part of a small investment group, separate from Horizon, focused on culinary ventures. We seek out authentic food experiences with potential for growth. What I witnessed yesterday, both the quality of your food and the character you displayed, caught my attention professionally." Miguel's frown deepened. "I'm not looking for charity." "This isn't charity," Aiden said firmly. "It's business. Our group provides capital, business expertise, and operational support. In return, we become partners in the venture. Equal risk, equal reward." "Partners?" Miguel echoed, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. "We believe there's a significant market for authentic Venezuelan cuisine in this city, particularly when it comes with a compelling story and genuine heart. What you lack in business infrastructure, we can provide. What we lack in culinary authenticity and soul, you have in abundance." Miguel stared at his coffee, mind racing. "I'm just a street vendor." "No," Aiden said quietly. "You're a chef who happens to work from a cart. There's a difference." For the next hour, Aiden outlined his vision. A small restaurant focused on Venezuelan street food, elevated but accessible. Miguel would be head chef and a full partner, with creative control over the menu. Aiden's group would handle financing, marketing, staffing, and business operations. "We don't want to change your food," Aiden emphasized. "We want to give it the platform it deserves." By the time they parted ways, Miguel had agreed to consider the proposal and meet Aiden's partners the following week. Walking home, the autumn sun warm on his face, Miguel felt something he hadn't experienced in years: possibility. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Miguel met with Aiden's investment group, a diverse collection of food industry veterans and finance professionals who asked pointed questions but treated him with respect. They visited potential restaurant locations together, with Miguel offering insights on kitchen layouts and flow. Architects presented preliminary designs that incorporated elements of Venezuelan culture without veering into cliché. Throughout it all, Miguel continued operating his cart, though with renewed energy. He found himself experimenting with new recipes, encouraged by Aiden's genuine interest in the possibility of a broader audience. Regular customers noticed the change in him, commenting on his brighter demeanor and asking about rumors they'd heard of a restaurant in the works. Not everything was smooth. There were moments of doubt when Miguel would wake in the night, heart pounding with fear that he was being naive, that this opportunity would dissolve or prove too good to be true. During tense negotiations over the partnership agreement, he nearly walked away, convinced he was out of his depth among these business professionals. It was during one such moment of doubt, standing in his small kitchen after a particularly challenging meeting about financial projections, that Miguel's phone rang. Expecting Aiden, he was surprised to hear his son's voice instead. "Dad, is it true? Are you opening a restaurant?" Miguel sank into a chair. "Tuduram, how did you hear about that?" "Aiden Chung called me," Carlos said, a note of amazement in his voice. "He wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping with the marketing strategy, given my background. Said he thought it might be meaningful for both parties involved." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. "I didn't know you were thinking about a restaurant," Carlos finally said, his voice softer. "After Mom died, you seemed so settled in your routine." "Stuck is more like it," Miguel admitted. "I didn't know how to move forward. And now?" Miguel looked around his small apartment, at the stack of business plans and design concepts on his table, at Elena's photograph watching from the wall. "Now I'm terrified," he said honestly, "but also alive. Like I have a purpose again. I've put in for a transfer to the West Coast office," Carlos said abruptly. "It won't be immediate, but within 6 months, I could be there for the opening." The words hung in the air, an offering of reconnection that Miguel had long stopped hoping for. He closed his eyes, feeling tears threaten. "I'd like that very much." Winter gave way to spring as the project gained momentum. The location, a corner space in a neighborhood balanced between commercial and residential, was secured. Construction began, transforming the empty shell into a warm, inviting space that would become Calle Maracaibo, named for his grandmother's hometown. Through it all, Miguel and Aiden developed an unlikely friendship. The CFO's analytical mind complemented Miguel's intuitive approach to food and service. Where Miguel saw potential problems, Aiden saw solutions. Where Aiden focused on efficiency, Miguel insisted on preserving the human touch that made his food special. "The numbers matter," Aiden would say during their weekly planning sessions, "but they're not the only thing that matters." It was during one such session, reviewing kitchen equipment orders, that Miguel finally asked the question that had lingered since their first meeting. "Why did you really approach me that day? There must be hundreds of food vendors with potential." Aiden set down his tablet, considering the question. "My parents owned a small dumpling shop in Hong Kong," he said finally. "When we immigrated here, they tried to recreate it, but struggled with regulations, language barriers, financing. Eventually, they gave up and took factory jobs instead." He adjusted his glasses, a gesture Miguel had come to recognize as a sign he was sharing something personal. "My mother was an artist with dough, like you are. I grew up watching her create something transcendent from simple ingredients, only to see that gift extinguished by circumstances." He met Miguel's gaze directly. "When I saw you feeding those shell-shocked employees, people who wouldn't even remember to thank you, much less become customers, I recognized something of my mother's spirit. The way food can be an act of grace." Miguel nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "And now you're the one with the power to change circumstances." "Something like that," Aiden acknowledged, "though I prefer to think of it as recognizing value that others miss." The conversation shifted back to business, but something had changed between them. A deeper understanding that their partnership was built on more than profit potential. As summer approached, the restaurant took shape. Miguel trained a small kitchen staff, teaching them his grandmother's techniques with patient precision. The menu was finalized, a carefully curated selection of street food classics alongside more elaborate dishes that showcased the depth of Venezuelan cuisine. A soft opening was scheduled for family and friends, with the grand opening to follow a week later. The night before the soft opening, Miguel stood alone in the completed restaurant. The staff had gone home hours ago, leaving him in the quiet space illuminated only by the small lights above the bar. He ran his hand along the smooth counter, marveling at how different this was from his humble cart. The dining room was warm and inviting, with photographs of Venezuelan street scenes and markets adorning the walls. One wall featured a mural of Maracaibo's waterfront, commissioned from a local Venezuelan artist. The open kitchen gleamed with new equipment, a far cry from his cramped apartment workspace. Miguel made his way to a small alcove near the entrance, where a single photograph hung in a simple frame. Elena, laughing in their kitchen, flour dusting her cheeks as she rolled empanada dough. Beside it was a smaller photograph of his grandmother, taken in her Maracaibo kitchen decades ago. The two women who had shaped his relationship with food watched over the restaurant, their spirits infused in every recipe. "I wish you could see this," he whispered to Elena's image. "You always said my food deserved a bigger stage." The soft sound of the door opening pulled Miguel from his reverie. He turned to see Aiden entering, followed by Carlos, who had arrived in town that morning. "Thought we might find you here," Aiden said with a knowing smile. Carlos approached, taking in the space with wide eyes. "Dad, this is incredible." "It is, isn't it?" Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I can't believe it's real." "Oh, it's real," Aiden assured him, producing a bottle of champagne from behind his back. "And tomorrow everyone else will see it too." As Aiden busied himself opening the champagne, Carlos moved closer to his father. "Mom would be so proud," he said quietly. Miguel nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When Carlos put an arm around his shoulders, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager, Miguel leaned into the embrace, feeling a circle completing itself. Aiden approached with 3 glasses of bubbling champagne. "A toast," he proposed, "to new beginnings, unexpected partnerships, and food that feeds more than just the body." The 3 men raised their glasses in the quiet restaurant, the soft clink echoing in the space that would soon be filled with conversation and laughter. "To Cali Maracaibo," Miguel said, his voice steady with newfound confidence. "And to remembering that sometimes sharing what little you have is the first step to abundance." The soft opening exceeded all expectations. Friends, family, and local food critics filled the restaurant, creating an atmosphere of celebration and discovery. Miguel moved between the kitchen and dining room, watching with quiet pride as people experienced his food in this new context. Carlos had invited several influencers from his marketing connections, resulting in a flurry of social media posts that generated immediate interest. By the end of the evening, the reservation list for the coming month was nearly full. In the days that followed, word spread. A prominent food blogger wrote about the authenticity of the cuisine and the warmth of the service. A local newspaper ran a feature on Miguel's journey from street vendor to restaurateur, complete with the story of how he had fed laid-off workers without expectation of return. On the night of the grand opening, a line formed outside the restaurant an hour before doors opened. Miguel watched from the kitchen window, a knot of anxiety and excitement in his chest. "Nervous?" Aiden asked, appearing at his side in an uncharacteristically casual outfit, his contribution to the front-of-house team for the evening. "Terrified," Miguel admitted. "What if they don't like it?" "They will," Aiden said with certainty. "But even if someone doesn't, remember what you told me when we first discussed this venture? Food is personal. Not everyone has to love it, but those who do will remember it forever." Miguel smiled, recognizing his own words. "When did you get so wise about food?" "I had a good teacher," Aiden replied, nudging Miguel's shoulder. "Now, chef, your kitchen awaits." The evening unfolded in a blur of activity. The kitchen worked with seamless coordination, plates emerging with Miguel's exacting standards met on each one. In the dining room, customers exclaimed over flavors both familiar and new, many sharing stories of their own connections to Venezuelan culture or expressing delight at discovering it for the first time. During a rare quiet moment near the end of service, Miguel stepped into the dining room. The space hummed with conversation and laughter, every table filled with people sharing food and stories. At one table, he spotted the young woman in the Navy suit, the one he'd given coffee to on that pivotal day outside Horizon Financial. She was dining with friends, gesturing enthusiastically as she explained something about the food. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up and recognized him. Her face broke into a wide smile, and she raised her glass in a small toast. Miguel nodded in acknowledgement, a wave of emotion washing over him as he realized how completely his life had transformed in the span of months. Later that night, after the last customers had departed and the staff had completed cleanup, Miguel, Aiden, and Carlos sat at the bar, exhausted but exhilarated. 67 5-star reviews posted online already, Carlos reported, scrolling through his phone. People are trying to book tables 3 months out. The food cost percentages looked good, Aiden added. Better than projections, actually. Your training with the kitchen staff paid off. Miguel listened to their analysis with a sense of detached wonder. The business metrics mattered, of course, but what filled his heart was something less tangible. The expressions on people's faces as they tasted his grandmother's recipes, The way strangers at adjacent tables had struck up conversations over shared plates, the pride in his son's eyes as he watched his father in his element. You know, Miguel said, interrupting their business discussion, I used to think success meant financial security, having enough to not worry. He looked around the restaurant, at the space that had become a physical manifestation of his lifelong passion. Now I think maybe it's about creating something that matters, something that connects people. Aiden raised his water glass. To connections, he said, his usual business-like demeanor softened by exhaustion and satisfaction. To family, Carlos added, both born and found. To unexpected second chances, Miguel finished, thinking of the day he'd impulsively shared his food with strangers, never imagining where that simple act of kindness would lead. And to remembering that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, streets filled with people moving between moments of their own lives, each carrying their own hopes and hardships. Inside Calle Maracaibo, three unlikely partners, the chef who had found his stage, the financier who had found his purpose, and the son who had found his way home, sat in companionable silence, savoring the sweet taste of a dream realized through the most unexpected of circumstances. And somewhere, Miguel liked to think, his grandmother and Elena were smiling, knowing that the recipes created with love were now feeding not just bodies, but souls and futures too.